everybody, it's Lori again, and welcome back to my kitchen. It is the height of garden harvest season for us, and we are bringing in the produce from our garden in mass quantities. So today, while I have all of these fresh vegetables, I want to share with you how I use them in my homemade pasta sauce. Now, towards the end of the recipe, you can decide whether you want to lean this a little bit more towards Italian pasta sauce for like spaghetti, or, to dip your garlic bread in, or lasagna or whatever. Or if you want to make it like what I'm going to do today, and just kind of leave it a basic pasta sauce recipe. And that just won't have the Italian herbs in it. That pretty much leans your sauce towards the Italian type sauce. But my sauce recipe uses just a lot of vegetables and a pretty large variety of vegetables. And so I'd like to share that with you today. And you know me, I like to keep things as easy as I can, because particularly at this time of the year, I'm just overwhelmed with things that I need to get preserved, and I'm pretty much burning the candle at both ends, and I'm tired and I'm exhausted. And so in my quest to keep things as easy as possible, I wrote my recipe so that I could remember it every year, and I'm going to share it with you today, okay? And like I said, this is a basic recipe. I use this sauce as I'm going to read it to you and walk you through. I use this sauce for things like goulash. I even use this as a base for like tomato soup. I go ahead, and after I make my sauce, I actually can pasta with it. I use dry elbow pasta, and I pour my homemade sauce over it. And so then in my quart jar, I have pretty much ready to eat goulash. All I have to do is add a pound of browned ground beef, or my dehydrated ground beef, and we have a meal in literally 10 minutes. Just so quick and easy. But I will just tell you exactly what you're going to need for ingredients first of all. I have approximately 20 pounds of tomatoes today, so in between 18 and 20 pounds of fresh tomatoes is what you will need. Now you can cut this recipe in half if you don't have so many mouths to feed, or you don't have endless supplies of vegetables coming from your garden. You don't have to make it in this huge quantity like what I do. Feel free to cut the recipe in half. That's absolutely fine to do. But I use 18 to 20 pounds of tomatoes. I use 5 large peppers, 5 large onions, 5 large carrots, 5 banana peppers, 5 small zucchini, or 1 very large zucchini. And then I use also 5 tablespoons of parsley and 5 tablespoons of garlic, minced garlic. Then at the very, very end, we're going to kind of reduce this down, and then we're going to add in a couple more ingredients after that, which is 3 cups of dry wine, a ½ cup salt. And I know that sounds like a lot of salt, but this is a very large recipe. ½ cup salt and 1 cup sugar. So right now, what I do is I will page down. I literally just have my tomatoes are just fresh out of the garden and washed, and I cored them, and I just cut them into quarters. And I have not peeled these or anything. And I have them in my 18-quart roasting pan. There's no water in this pan. There is no grease. It hasn't been greased. So it's just chock full of fresh tomatoes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cover this pan, and I am going to bake this. And you can do this in your oven also. It's just kind of hot here today, and so I don't want the oven heating up the whole kitchen. So I am using my electric roaster. It does lift out, and I could bake these in the oven also, but I'm just going to leave them in my roaster today. So I'm going to cover these, and I'm going to bake them at 350 degrees for about an hour and a half. I'll check them and see what they look like at that point in time. That's a large quantity. I'm sorry, I'm having problems with my camera here today. Actually, I'm probably having problems with me. I'm Like I said, I'm burning the candle at both ends and I'm really, really tired right now. So I don't think I'm functioning very well. So I'm gonna apologize ahead of time if this video doesn't go as smoothly as some of the others have. But back to the tomatoes. I'm going to cover it and I'm going to bake them at 350 for about an hour and a half, and then I'll check at that point in time to make sure that they've kind of cooked down, and I'll walk you along with me on that process also. But hour and a half, maybe hour 45 minutes, but 20 pounds of tomatoes, that's a lot of tomatoes. But 350 for just an hour and a half or so, and then we're going to come back and then I'll show you what I do next to reduce all of the liquid off of these tomatoes. Now in this baking period, do not stir your tomatoes at all. Leave them completely undisturbed, completely untouched. Just bake them for an hour and a half or an hour 45 minutes at 350 degrees. And then we'll come back and I'll show you how to lift off so much fluid out of here. This, I tell you, this way of doing your tomatoes reduces your cooking time by hours. I swear by it. It just, I know a lot of people cook their sauce for like 6, 8, 10 hours, to reduce it and to evaporate all the juice off. I'm going to show you how you can do that in an hour and a half. So stick around and I'll be right back. All right, guys, so I got into more comfortable clothes. The tomatoes have been baking for about an hour and a half. Now, I did kind of smell them burning just a little bit for some reason today, and so I came in and I turned my electric roaster down to 300 because, there was just something was not going. They were not baking quick enough to release all the juice, and so I did turn my temperature down. Now, in my oven, I have never, ever had that problem, but with the electric roaster, I suppose it's because the heat is just right there on the pan itself instead of, surrounding it and more equally distributed. But anyway, so I lowered it down to 300 and it's been baking for an hour and a half. So I'm going to put the camera down on the roasting pan and we'll see if there. Hopefully I've gotten some of my technical difficulties with myself over here since I've had a little bit of rest now. But I just want to show you. Now I have not stirred these at all. And look at how beautiful they are to start with. But what I do is I take my ladle and you can press down on these tomatoes and gather all of this liquid just right out of that pan. And this is where I was saying that you can draw so much liquid off in just such a short time. It's just, I don't know, baking your tomatoes like this is just, honestly, it's just amazing, in my opinion. And like I said, I don't ever stir them. There's no need to stir them. And if you stir them, what you're doing is you're just reincorporating all that juice back into the tomatoes as they get cooked and softer. And so if you don't stir them, then you can separate out this juice so much easier. And we're not going to have all of that cook down period trying to evaporate all of this tomato water or tomato juice off of the tomatoes. So I'm just going to go around my pan and I'm going to make different wells, just pushing down with the back of my soup ladle and just kind of squishing them down and just getting all of that extra liquid just right off of those tomatoes. Whoop, now we got a little half a tomato in there. We don't want him. We want just nothing but juice. Look at how slick that is. I think I'm going to turn my roaster off. I can just really hear it bubbling. I'll just turn that off for a minute while I'm drawing off this good juice. Now, as you can see, I am collecting my juice in a container just in case I want to reincorporate it later into my sauce. If my sauce, if I draw too much juice out and it gets too dry, then I have all this good tomato juice that I can add back until it is the consistency that I want it to be. And also you can go ahead and you can can this tomato juice just as it is too, to use, however you want to. Just drink it or put it in soups or in hot dishes. It's just absolutely amazing, amazing stuff. So I'm just going to go around my pan and I'm just going to keep making wells, and I'm going to draw off the majority of this liquid. And so then after I get it drier, I won't have you sit here and watch this whole thing, but after I get as much liquid off as I really feel like I want to, then I will come back and I'll show you what I do next, all right? So I'll just sit here and I'll keep making little wells and keep drawing the juice off, and then I'll be back in just a few minutes. All right, guys, so I drew off, just by making little wells, I drew off close to a gallon worth of tomato juice. And I'm working on my second gallon container. And what I'm doing now is I couldn't draw out anymore with just making the little wells on my tomatoes. So now I've just started to kind of pull them up to one side of the roasting pan. All right, and it does take a few minutes to get this done, but just kind of pull them up and gently mound them up on top of themselves. And you're going to get even more fluid off of those tomatoes. It will just pool in that open part of the pan that you're creating by pulling the tomatoes up into a pile. Just very carefully, just pull them up and mound them up, and that fluid is just going to run off. And so then this is the time that I switch tools and I switch to a spoon, because it's a little bit more shallow and I can't get my ladle to fill up properly. So then I start just ladling it out with my spoon and continuing to just draw off fluid from these tomatoes. So I'm going to continue doing that for a few more minutes, and then I'll be back again. All right, so as you can see, I have drawn up a lot of liquid on my tomatoes. I've reduced their volume by half. And I will show you, I have an entire gallon. Now this is a gallon Kool-Aid jug. I have an entire gallon and a half a gallon. So 1.5 gallon of tomato juice was drawn off of these tomatoes. This is just such a wonderful method, in my opinion, of just reducing your cook down time. A lot of people put their tomatoes through a mill raw, and then all of the pulp and juice is mixed up, and they have to cook that for hours and hours and hours to evaporate off all of that excess tomato water or tomato juice to get a nice thick sauce. This way, in only an hour and a half of baking, you can draw all of that liquid off just with the snap of a finger. Okay, so this is my simplified life. I know a lot of people don't like the skins and seeds. We don't have an issue with that in our house. But what I do is I take a stick blender or an immersion blender and I just emulsify these skins and seeds just until it's just completely smooth. So I'm just going to take and I'm going to start working at it. Now, if you think that you have taken off too much fluid, remember you have that tomato juice. You can add some back in if it's not emulsifying and it's not liquidy enough for you to really get a nice smooth blend. So you can always put juice back in. All right, so I think I have this right where I want it. Look at this beautiful sauce. This is just gorgeous. And the stick blender just, I really feel like it just does such a good job. And it's all in one pan. I'm not, changing pans. I'm not having to mill it into other containers. This is just all right in one pan. Okay, so now that I have this emulsified, I see another little burnt piece that I want to get out of there. I picked one of those out while I was emulsifying too. I told you guys I kind of smelled like, the tomatoes were burning at one point, and I turned my roaster down, and I'm not exactly sure why that happened. Maybe these tomatoes have a little higher sugar content or something this year. I'm not really sure, but I did turn my roaster down in the baking process to around 300, and that seemed to be a little bit better. But I just don't want that burnt stuff in my sauce, so I'm just going to scrape this off the sides of my pan so I don't have any black flaky things that I don't want in my sauce in there. All right, so I'm going to get things rearranged here off cam. I'm going to move my roaster out of the way, and I'm going to get my food processor out, and I'll show you how quick and easy I prepare all those extra veggies, the onions and the peppers and the celery and all that stuff. I do that in the food processor. So I'm going to move this out of the way, get my food processor out, get my vegetables all prepped and ready to go, and I'll show you how quick and easy that goes. All right, so before I prepare all the other vegetables that go into my sauce, I thought that I'd better stop and I better explain to you, when I said either 5 small zucchini or 1 very large zucchini. And, people's interpretations could be different. And being precise is not really that important in this recipe. You can throw in whatever you want to in this recipe. But I just thought I'd give you an example of what I call a small zucchini, about the size of a good-sized cucumber. Okay? You can also use your yellow straight neck squash in place. If you don't have green zucchini, go ahead and use your straight neck yellow squash. These two vegetables are completely interchangeable. And zucchini is so wonderful. It just takes on the flavor of anything that you cook it with. Now these smaller zucchini, I don't even bother peeling these. If the skin is soft enough that you can poke your fingernail through the skin, you really don't have to peel it at all. It's going to emulsify up in there, absolutely no problem at all. So these are the small size that I'm talking about. And when I say or 5 small or 1 large zucchini, I'm talking one of these monsters. You know how this happens. You look at that plant one day and you're thinking, oh, I can get him picked tomorrow. Then you come back tomorrow and he's this size. Well, this is a perfect opportunity to use these large zucchini. Now, the large zucchinis, the skins are tougher, and so I do peel these, and then I cut them in half lengthwise, and I just take a spoon and I just scrape out all of that soft, meshy fiber seed pocket. And so this is what I'm saying, 1 large zucchini or 5 small. This is my large zucchini. Not that it matters. The bell peppers, I do try to pick out the largest ones in my garden for this recipe just because bell pepper, the flavor in this sauce, it's just so important to have a good sized bell pepper. Also with onions, your interpretation of a large onion might be different than my interpretation, and onion is super important in this recipe too. So make sure that you have onions that are really good sized onions. See, I can't even get my fingers around that one, and I put 5 of those large onions in there. Banana peppers, of course, are very mild, and so if you don't have really super large banana peppers, you could add a few extra of those, and you're not gonna you're going to increase the volume of your sauce, but you won't change the taste of it at all because banana peppers, like I said, they're pretty mild. And so just like the zucchini, I kind of use the banana peppers as a filler. So if you don't have really super large ones, go ahead and add a couple more. It's just when I wrote my recipe, that's how I did it in numbers so that I could just remember 5 of this, 5 of this, 5 of the other thing. So anyway, that just gives you at least a little insight on when I say large, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, so I'm going to get my food processor all set up, and we're just going to buzz all these things through the food processor and add it to our sauce and get it cooking again. So I'll be right back. All right, I've got all of my vegetables just roughly chopped and ready to go. Now, I don't have any fresh celery on hand today, and so for my 5 stalks of celery, I'm just going to dig into my dehydrated celery and just kind of estimate what I think 5 stalks is. That's probably a little bit more than 5 stalks. Celery kind of dehydrates down to nothing. It's pretty amazing stuff. But anyway, with the rest of it, I have all fresh vegetables. I'm going to page you down here. And as you can see, I just rough chop everything. Just very, very roughly chopped. And my carrots, I did not peel them at all. They were sitting out on the porch waiting for me from the garden for a couple of days, and so they're a little bit dark, but you know what? There's absolutely nothing wrong with them. I scrubbed them up super, super good, and they're going to cook and they're going to get canned, and there's just no problems with that at all. The zucchini, like I said, I peeled it and de-seeded it, and then I'm just kind of, you guys, I've told you before, I am a lazy canner. I just do things as easily as I possibly can. And so all I do is I just rough chop all of my veggies that go into my sauce, and then I'm just going to put them through the food processor here. And these are one of those things, a food processor, as most of you probably already know, a food processor is seriously just invaluable in the kitchen, especially when you're canning. It just saves so much time. It's just, they're awesome things. And my original one that we got when we were first married finally burnt out a couple of years ago, and I found this one at a thrift store for like $5. So don't walk past those things in the thrift store. Test it while you're there in the store. This one has been running and working well for me. It only has the one blade, so I can't grate things in it, but I can chop things in it. This one has been running for 3 years now for me for $5. I'm telling you, thrift stores are absolutely the best. But that's not the point here today either. All I do is I just take my rough chopped veggies and I just put them in my food processor and just munch them all up. And you can do this however you want to do it. And if you don't want to put them through, or you don't have a food processor, you can just, chop them up by hand and put them in your sauce too. That is absolutely fine. All right, so I've got to go and grab my minced garlic because I forgot to grab that, and I'll be back in just 1 second. All right, so I decided that I would get my area cleaned up since I was taking that little break to get the garlic. Now, I know that this is not a measuring tablespoon, this is just a regular tablespoon, but we are not afraid of garlic in our house. And so I told you in the recipe 5 tablespoons. This is just totally up to you on how much you want to put in. But like I said, we're garlic fiends. I'm going to put 3 of these great big scoopers in there, maybe even a little bit more than that. Pasta sauce, in my opinion, can never have too much garlic in it. And since this is store-bought and minced, I feel like it's not quite as strong as fresh garlic. So that's just my opinion. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and we are going to mix up this lovely pot of all of these beautiful vegetables along with our emulsified tomatoes. Now at this point in time, also, if you wanted to lean yours towards more of the Italian side, you can go ahead and put in Italian seasonings at this point in time. And generally what I do, I mean, you can do oregano and basil and whatever else individually, but I just buy actually what's called an Italian blend or Italian seasoning. And for a large pot like this, I would literally put in a 1/4 cup or a 1/2 cup of seasoning to this large amount of sauce. And I know that just sounds like it's an insane amount of seasoning, but it really does take that. It does take that much to really come out like an Italian sauce. And another thing, you know, with the tomato sauces, I'm just really a fiend about adding, obviously, as you can see, adding quite a bit of additional veggies to mine. You know, I love having the carrots in there, just really fill it out and give it just this rounded flavor to your sauce. The zucchini is a wonderful filler. That just kind of takes on all of the other flavors of the sauce. But when I say a filler, it takes a small amount of tomatoes and it stretches them into a very large amount. And bonus is that nobody ever knows that those extra things are in there. So picky kids and whatever, you know, oh, I don't like carrots, or oh, I hate zucchini. And you make it into a pasta sauce like this and you emulsify it all so that they can't identify chunks of vegetables, and you can get your kids more nourishment with those vegetables in that sauce and they don't even know it. So I'm going to leave my sauce plain today. I'm not going to lean it towards the Italian seasoning because, like I said, I was just purposely doing this so that I could make like a goulash base today. But at this point in time, if you want Italian seasoning in it, you go ahead and you add it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put this on about 300 degrees and we're going to let this cover it, and we're going to let it cook for about another hour and a half until all of these fresh veggies that we just added to the sauce, until they cook and get very soft and really get blended in. All the flavors are blended in. So we'll come back after that secondary baking period is done. See you in a bit. All right, so I completely ran out of steam yesterday. I kind of told y'all that I was burning the candle at both ends and I was just feeling exhausted. So I added all of my fresh vegetables, as you saw, from the food processor, and I allowed my sauce to bake or cook for about an hour and a half. And it's getting pretty cool here at night, and you know, it dips down below 50 degrees in the 40s. And so I just set my roaster overnight on the porch where it was protected, but it was chilled from the outside, you know, outdoor temperatures. And I just left it overnight. And so this morning I brought it in and I got everything heated back up. And so I'm at the point, even though it's the next day, I'm at the point where I've added all those fresh veggies, those wonderful fresh diced veggies or minced veggies, and we have cooked it for about an hour and a half. Now this is the point then that I want to add some of my other ingredients. So I'm going to page down and I'll show you what I'm going to be doing here. And there, I think that looks about right. I do add wine to my sauce, and the reason why I add wine to my sauce, number one, it really adds a wonderful flavor to any sauce that you're doing. But number two, it does increase the acidity level. Now you saw the amount of other fresh vegetables, you know, the peppers and onions and zucchini and all the carrots and everything that I added. Even though your tomatoes are acidic, when you add those extra vegetables, you are stretching that acidity quite a bit. And I add massive amounts of other fresh vegetables. And so I want to bring that acidity level back up. And I don't want to add vinegar or lemon juice because I feel like it ruins the taste of your sauce. So what I like to do is I like to add wine. And I just go out. Now don't fall for those expensive cooking wines, okay? Any dry red wine will work. And I will show you, this is one of my favorites for doing sauce. This is called oak leaf, and I use the red blend. And I literally buy this at, it's the Walmart liquor store for $2.34 a bottle. And this lends just an absolute flavor, a beautiful, beautiful flavor to your sauce for $2 a bottle. So don't go out and spend tons of money on what they call cooking wine at your grocery store. Just go to a liquor store and buy a cheap, dry red wine. Now, I do specify dry. Don't get sweet, get a dry wine. And I've been very, very happy with this Oak Leaf brand red blend wine. Now, I had about a cup of that left from a previous batch of sauce the other day. So I did have to go. I was in another town for work and they didn't have a Walmart liquor store. So I had to go to another liquor store and I found this Barefoot Cabernet. And this was a little bit more expensive. But believe it or not, the Oak Leaf was actually a corked wine. This Barefoot wine is just literally a twist off cap. So you know how cheap this stuff is. If they have a twist off cap, yeah, whatever. But it's a Cabernet. And when I opened this and smelled this morning, it actually has a wonderful aroma and it is a dry wine. So I'm hoping that this will work well too. But like I said, my favorite is the Oak Leaf at $2.34 or $2.84 a bottle or something like that. Just very, very cheap stuff. And it really, really works well in your sauce. And yes, I do absolutely encourage you to use a little bit of, well, that's not going to sit there now, to use the wine in your sauce because it brings the acidity level back up so that you don't have to, process your sauce extremely long amounts of time in your canner. If you bring the acidity level back up, then you're back down at an acceptable and easier canning time. So what I do is I do 3 cups of dry red wine, okay? And then what I add is I have a large can of tomato paste. This is 18 ounces of tomato paste. So that would be 3 of your small 6-ounce cans. But I am lucky enough that I can find it in these large cans. And, you know, remember that I'm working with a lot of sauce here. And so I put in the full 18 ounces of tomato paste. And what I do is I add that to my wine so that I can kind of mix it up and dilute it a little bit. It's a little bit easier to mix into your sauce if you dilute it a bit in your wine first. So I just add that into my wine. I think I got that pretty clean. And I just take my whisk and whisk that up in the wine carefully. I gotta grab a washcloth here. I got tomato paste on my finger. There we go. Now we won't make a mess. So 3 cups of wine, 18 ounces of tomato paste, and then I also add 1 cup of sugar, and I put that right into my wine and tomato paste, and that kind of helps dissolve that sugar a little bit also. All right, I'm going to tip this down a little bit more for you. There we go. So we have our hot sauce. And we're just going to go ahead and add our tomato paste and wine and sugar mixture. Oh, that smells absolutely heavenly. Just wonderful. And we'll just mix that in real well. The tomato paste just kind of adds more of a tomato flavor. You know, I've diluted my garden fresh tomatoes quite a bit with all of the luscious veggies, and so the tomato paste just kind of solidifies the fact that, oh yeah, this is a tomato based sauce. See, I got another little burnt part off the edge of my pan here. I'm just going to remove that. All right, and then at this point in time, you can see that my veggies have been cooked, but they're still pretty chunky. So now I'm going to just take my stick blender again, and I'm just going to smooth and emulsify this whole thing one more time. Now I know I told you that it seems like an awful lot of salt. I have a half a cup of salt, but you got to think about how many veggies you have in here. You have 20 pounds of tomatoes, plus you probably have another, at least 3 or 4 pounds, if not more, of other vegetables in there. So that salt has to go a really long way. You know, you can of course scant it and then taste and add more if you want as you go along. But I just know, just from our preference, that for our family, it needs at least a half a cup of salt. And sometimes I even add a little bit more than that. But anyway, so I've added that salt in there. And I'm probably going to spend a couple more times emulsifying. I mean, I've gotten it smoothed quite a bit already, just in that short period of time. But I think I'm going to smooth it just a little bit more. And then after I get it smoothed, I'm going to add some parsley just for, well, a little bit of taste, but mostly because it's kind of nice to have a little green stuff in there. It just kind of makes a nice looking sauce. So, all right, so I'm going to emulsify for just a little while longer. All right, I'm going to plug my roaster back in. I only have one plug back there by my stove, so it's got to share and do dual purpose. So at this point in time, then, we have everything all nice and emulsified. We have increased or brought the acidity level back up with our wine and our sugar. The sugar also helps take down some of the acidity taste to your mouth and your stomach. It doesn't necessarily reduce the acid, but it helps in your mouth and stomach. So at this point in time, then, after I've got it all emulsified again, I'm just going to add a healthy dose of parsley. And when I say a healthy dose, I mean a healthy dose. Just because it's just kind of pretty in your sauce. And parsley, parsley doesn't really add a whole bold flavor. And so, it's kind of hard to overdo parsley. You don't have to worry about overdoing it and getting it overbearing. Now, if you're doing your Italian sauce with your Italian spices, add those a little conservatively at first and just kind of keep tasting your sauce and adding more if you feel like it needs more of those Italian flavored seasonings. But you can always put more in. You can't take more, you can't take it out after you put it in. So build it up slowly if you're doing an Italian sauce. This is just a basic sauce for like goulash, is what I'm doing today. So, oh my goodness, you guys, that is absolutely just gorgeous. Look at how nice and thick this sauce is. It is just beautiful, beautiful sauce. All right, so I'm going to get my canner set up and my jars set up, and then I'll be back. Okay, so we're working with hot sauce, temperature hot. And so I have my canner heating up on the stove, because if we're working with hot sauce, we want a hot canner for those jars to go into so we don't have any thermal shock. Now, there's a couple of different ways that you can can this. You can can the sauce just by itself. And if you want to do that, go ahead and either hot water bath or steam can. Pints would be 30 minutes and quarts would be 40 minutes. All right, and that's just a hot water bath or a steam can. 30 minutes for pints, 40 minutes for quarts. That's just for just the sauce. Now what I do is I add dry pasta. And so at the end of my canning time, my pasta has absorbed moisture and cooked in the jar, so that when I go to open that jar, I have, what is the name of it? A goulash. Sorry, I was thinking hamburger helper. And yeah, obviously I haven't had enough coffee this morning. But anyway, I add pasta to it so that when it's done canning, I have a ready-to-serve goulash. And then what I can do is very easily just add a pound of ground beef, or sometimes I elect to add my dehydrated ground beef, and I have a heat and serve meal in 10 minutes. And so the instructions that I'm going to give you, if you're going to can it with the pasta, is 1 hour of hot water bath or steam canning. Now, if you're going to use your stovetop PC as a steam canner, I want you to add a little additional water above your 3 quarts to make sure that you get through that hour of steam canning, okay? Water bath, it would just be traditionally submerged under 1 or 2 inches of water, and you water bath it for an entire hour. Now, if you would like to PC it, if you're adding the pasta and you feel more comfortable doing it in the pressure canner because of the pasta, although I will tell you, remember that we have increased the acidity level with that wine and sugar. This is really, really safe, even with the addition of pasta. And I personally elect to hot water bath or steam can this. Today I'm going to be steam canning it. But if you feel better pressure canning it, I would like you to pressure can pints for 20 minutes and quarts for 25 minutes at the appropriate pressure for your altitude. Now, for a quart jar, I add 3/4 cup of dry elbow pasta. For a pint jar, I would only add 1/2 cup of dry elbow pasta. So 3/4 cup for a quart and 1/2 cup for a pint. So to this pasta that I've added to my jar, I suppose I need to have a ladle here. And I better get an oven mitt on. Since I'm working with hot sauce, I want to have an oven mitt on. I'm kind of crunched for space here since I have my roaster pan in the way of where I usually prepare all my jars and fill them. So what I want you to do is, number one, if you're doing it with the pasta, do not prepare any more jars than can fit in your canner. So I know that 7 quarts fit into my canner, and that's all I'm going to prepare. Because if you do it with the pasta, you don't want your pasta just sitting in that sauce. It will be just a great big glob and a huge piece of cement in the bottom of your jar. So if you're adding pasta, dry pasta to it, only prepare as many as you can immediately. All right, so here we go. And what I do is I just add my hot pasta sauce to the jar, and I fill it up to approximately 3/4 full, okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to take, now non-metallic, okay, and I have this wonderful plastic spoon. And what I do is I just mix that pasta up with the sauce immediately. Just mix it right on up in there. I hear my pan is sizzling. I'm going to turn my roaster off there. So I mix this sauce right on up with the dry pasta really, really well. Okay? So you've got it 3/4 full with pasta and sauce. I might add just a touch more pasta sauce, but not much. There we go. And then remember all that wonderful tomato juice that you pulled out of your baked tomatoes? We're going to add some of that back. Oops, I hit my camera. You guys, I'm really bumbling around here today. I do apologize. Some days are like that. Anyway, so we have all that wonderful tomato juice that we pulled off of our baked tomatoes. And what we're going to do then is we're going to put a little of that liquid back in. And it's just easier for me to work with the thick sauce. The reason why I don't incorporate it back into the sauce is I don't really know what to tell you as far as amounts of liquid to add back into your sauce. And so just fill your jar up 3/4 full and then add tomato juice, just plain tomato juice, back into that jar to approximately 1-inch headspace. I do leave a little extra, about, I'd say 1.5-inch headspace on this particular recipe because, you know, your pasta is going to expand a lot in this jar. And that's really why I only do 3/4 of a cup of pasta instead of a full cup of pasta too in my quart-sized jars. But adding that little amount of tomato juice back in there is going to allow your pasta enough fluid to absorb into the pasta. So there we go. We had 3/4 full with our nice thick sauce in our pasta, and then we topped it off with just tomato juice that we had drawn off of those tomatoes when we baked them. And that's all there is to it. Now we're going to wipe our rim, place our flat lid and our ring fingertip tight, and pop that right into the canner, the hot canner, which I'm going to turn down here a little bit. All right, so let me grab another jar. I have my 3/4 cup pasta in there, dry uncooked pasta. I'm going to fill 3/4 full with my pasta sauce. I'm going to give that a good stir. I'm going to add just a little bit more sauce to bring it up to that 3/4 mark. Okay, there we are. I'll get that out of the way so you can see. 3/4 full, okay? And then I'm going to top off with just plain tomato juice to about 1.5 inch headspace. There we are. Give that another little mix. Give it a wipe. And get that flat lid and ring on. And into the hot canner it goes. Okay, so I'm just going to continue filling my jars here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to steam can these in my stovetop pressure canner. I'm electing to steam can these for 1 hour today. And the reason why I do that is because, remember, we have added that additional 1 cup sugar in the sauce. And sometimes when you're pressure canning things with sugar in them, they scorch and burn. Now, at a 20-minute pressure canning period, I don't think you should have any problems with that, but I personally just elect, because this is a high acid thing, I just elect to hot water bath it. Even with the pasta in there, I just hot water bath it. So I'm going to steam can, which is the equivalent of hot water bathing, for 1 hour. So I'm going to continue filling my jars up, and then I'm going to steam can these for 1 hour, and then I'll come back and show you the beautiful results. Okay guys, so I came back, I got all of my jars filled, and I want to show you that I'm using my pressure canner as a stovetop steam canner. And because I'm going for an hour, I added additional water, and the water is about 3/4 of the way up the jars, because in an hour steam bath, I don't want to run my canner out of water. So that's the first thing that I wanted to share with you. If you're going to, like me, steam can them. And then I want to share something that happened. Let me get my top on my canner here. All right, and we're on medium. Okay, and I want to share with you something that happened while I was finishing filling my jars, okay? I always try, excuse me, I always try to be completely honest with each and every one of you. And sometimes that means the good, and sometimes that means the ugly. But I always want to have honesty between me and you who are listening. And I don't want to be one of those people that just always blows sunshine and rainbows and unicorns at you. I have been canning for 40 years, and yes, I may be an experienced canner, but I want to share with you, not everything always goes perfectly, even after all of these years that I have canned. And something happened here this morning while I was sharing with you how to do this recipe. I had turned my electric roaster down on the sauce because I had seen that it was kind of bubbling and burning around the edges. And so I turned it completely off. And I am not really sure whether my sauce cooled off quickly enough, or because my canner was on the heat, I had heated it up. You know how I always tell you, match the temperature of your food to the temperature of your canner to avoid what? Thermal shock, right? So I had what I thought was hot sauce. I had hot canner, and guess what happened to me? I had put some jars in the canner, and I was finishing up the last couple of jars, and I heard this, and I thought, what was that? So I look in my canner, and I'm kind of touching my jars. Sure enough, one of my jars was rocking. I knew exactly what had happened. I had a classic case of thermal shock. And so I just want to encourage each and every one of you, look at that, classic case of thermal shock. Just 2 pieces. Fits right together like a puzzle. Right there, and it's back whole. That is a classic case of thermal shock. So I guess I felt it was just share worthy. I know some of you, especially if you're just beginning canning, sometimes you have frustrating things that happen. And I just want to encourage you and tell you that even we who have been canning for decades, sometimes we have problems too. Just don't give up. What I did, since it was involving pasta, I didn't want to get the rest of my jars in there and start my canning process because I was still at the very beginning. And so what I did is I went and I cleaned my canner out. I took all my jars out, cleaned my canner out, and just refilled it with fresh water and got it heated again, and then put my jars back in. And of course, filled another jar to replace the one that broke. But I just wanted to share that with you because in all honesty and in all reality, nothing ever goes perfectly. You know, some things run really smoothly and some things come like second nature, and you can be cruising along just fine for months, and then all of a sudden, bam, you have one of those days. Well, I'm having one of those days. In fact, I've had two of those days here. But anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. So now that my canner is clean, I am going to start my steam canning session of 1 hour for my pasta and sauce. And I will return when that's done to show you how beautiful these jars are. All right, so I have steam canned my pasta and homemade pasta sauce for an hour. So I'm going to page down so that you can see as I bring them out of the canner what the results are. Let's see, where's my, there they are. All right, here we go. Look at how beautiful this is. Gorgeous pasta and sauce. Hot water bath or steam canned for 1 hour. You can PC this for 20 minutes. And you pretty much have a meal ready in a jar. Now, what I like to do with this, like I said, is I will open a jar of what I consider my homemade goulash, and I just simply add it to a pound of ground beef. Now, I know that I have shared in other videos or in comments or whatever that I really don't care personally, and my family does not care for canned ground beef. Now, you know, there's absolutely nothing with nothing wrong with canned ground beef, but we just don't personally like it in our home. So what I like to do is I like to fully brown it and drain it in hot water, and then I dehydrate it. And so mostly what I will do is I will take some of my dehydrated ground beef, and I'll add the dehydrated ground beef to one of these jars of goulash. Otherwise, I'll freshly brown it. But if you do have canned ground beef, you could just take a jar of this and a jar of your canned ground beef and add them together and heat them up. I'm telling you, you guys, this is just, it's amazing stuff. Let's see if I can get it up there for you. The pasta has fully reconstituted and cooked in the pasta sauce. One thing I think that I did forget to mention is after you add your wine and your tomato paste and sugar and salt, make sure to taste your sauce before you go ahead and can it, either in just sauce form or with the pasta. Taste it, because if you feel like it needs just a little additional, I don't know, salt, or maybe a little bit more sugar, or maybe you want to add a little bit more garlic to it or whatever, that would be the point that you want to do that. I did off cam taste my sauce and it was just spot on amazing for goulash. Like I said, I do not, for this particular canning thing that I do, I don't really lean it towards the Italian herb side. But if you wanted to have an Italian pasta can, you definitely can add those Italian herbs. And like I mentioned before, I said, do it a little bit at a time. I don't want to tell you exactly a measurement of Italian herbs to add to your sauce. That has to be a by taste thing. So start small and just kind of keep adding and tasting as you go along for your Italian herbs. But I love having these on my shelf. It's just, I know, a lot of people will say, well, pasta, why are you even canning pasta? It only takes like 10 minutes to cook pasta up. Well, it's actually more than 10 minutes because you have to get a pot out, you have to fill it with water, you have to bring it to boiling, you have to put your pasta in there, and then you have to cook it and drain it, and then you have at least 2 dishes because you have an additional pot that you boiled it in and your colander to drain it. So yeah, me being the lazy canner and sometimes, life is just really busy and you just want those really convenient meals. And this is an absolutely convenient meal. Let me tell you, pop it open, heat it up with a little bit of browned ground beef, and you have a meal in less than 10 minutes and in one pot. So with my, another thing is with my 3/4 of a cup of pasta in each quart jar or only a half a cup in each pint jar, the reason why I tell you that is because it does expand a lot, as the pasta absorbs the water, it expands a lot, but it also leaves enough sauce to also cover your browned ground beef, and it doesn't get dried out as much. So that is my way of making homemade goulash in a jar. Like I said, the sauce is pretty versatile. If you put those Italian seasonings in there, you have an Italian pasta sauce that can go over spaghetti, or, if you have large shell noodles, stuffed noodles, if you want to use it in lasagna, whatever you want to do with it. So I hope that you found all of this information useful and it gives you at least somewhere to start making your own homemade sauce at home. I find it absolutely amazing. It's just chocked full of fresh vegetables, and if you emulsify it enough, if your kids are picky eaters, or even if you have a, I don't know, picky husband or a wife or son or daughter or whatever, if you emulsify that enough, they're never even going to know that they are getting that big of a serving of vegetables when they're eating your wonderful sauce. So I hope you found it useful. Thank you again for spending your time with me. God bless you all. And as always, happy canning, everybody. Hey, just a little bit extra for those of you who stick around at the end of the movie for like those little tags at the end or extra scenes. Look at this. This is one of the jars that I just canned on camera for all of you. And it didn't seal because I didn't check my old jar and I have just a little bit of a chip on that side. So I didn't seal. But this has been processed just like all of the other jars. And for all of those wondering, is the pasta mushy, Mom? I don't know. Does that look mushy to you? Look at here. I can stir it. I can stab it with my fork. Look at, not mushy at all. This is absolutely beautiful, beautiful pasta in wonderful pasta sauce. Mm. Oh my goodness, that just really makes me happy.